Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. I got married when I was 26. My wife was 29. We had a good relationship. Not perfect, obviously, because no relationship is, but good enough that I never had any reason to regret proposing to her. We had already been living together for about a year before the wedding, so by that point, we knew each other's habits, schedules, moods, and all the little things that usually surprise people after marriage. She had 2 children from a previous relationship. They stayed with us sometimes, but not very often. When my wife moved upstate to live with me, the kids remained closer to their father's side of the family. At the time, I did not think there was anything strange about that arrangement. She loved her children. I saw that whenever they visited. She called them regularly, sent them money, bought them things, and worried about them like any mother would. From what she had told me, her previous relationship with their father had been extremely toxic. She had spent years trying to hold everything together. Eventually, I think she simply reached the point where she could not do it anymore. She needed distance. She needed a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her life somewhere else. And honestly, I was happy that I could be part of that new life. Our schedules were probably the hardest part of the relationship. She worked mornings. Depending on the day, she would start somewhere between 6 and 8 in the morning and usually finish between 5 and 7 in the evening. She worked at a car dealership, and some days were longer than others depending on how busy they were. I worked nights at the airport. My shift was usually from 4 in the afternoon until 11 at night. It was not a great job, but it paid enough for me to contribute. My wife made more money than I did, so she handled most of the major bills. Rent, utilities, groceries, things like that. I helped where I could. I always felt a little guilty about it, but she never made me feel bad. Not once. She knew that I had bigger plans for myself. Looking back now, some of those dreams probably were unrealistic, but she never laughed at them. She would tell me to keep trying. She would say that I had time. She wanted me to build something I was proud of instead of spending my whole life doing something I hated just because it paid slightly better. That was one of the things I loved most about her. She was supportive, selfless, motivating. She had this way of making me believe that I could eventually become the person I wanted to be. That is part of why what happened still hurts so much. One night, we were behind on a few bills, nothing serious, but enough that we had both been thinking about it. I had offered to pick up some extra shifts at the airport. My wife told me not to. She said she could stay late for overtime instead. I argued with her a little, but she insisted. She said I was already working enough and that she could handle it. So that evening, she stayed late. I remember actually being a little happy about it. Not because she had to work more, obviously, but because I thought our schedules might finally line up for once. If she stayed late enough, we might both get home around the same time. Usually, I came home after 11, and she was already asleep or getting ready for bed. That night, I thought maybe we would get an hour together. We texted throughout the day. That was normal for us. Whenever one of us had a break, we would message the other. Sometimes we FaceTimed. Sometimes it lasted only a few minutes. Other times, if things were slow, we stayed on the phone much longer. Nothing important was usually said. We talked about customers, coworkers, what we wanted for dinner, things we needed from the store, random nonsense. It was mostly just a way to make the workday easier. Around 10:30 that night, I had about 30 minutes left on my shift. At that point, there was usually not much happening at the airport. Most of my work had already been done. The final half hour was normally just waiting for the clock to reach 11. I was bored, so I took out my phone and called my wife. I wanted to see whether she was getting ready to leave. She did not answer. That was not immediately strange. If she had been with a customer or talking to a manager, she would not have answered. Still, one thing bothered me. Her dealership closed at 10. Whenever she worked until closing, she usually spent maybe 15 or 20 minutes afterward counting things, finishing paperwork, or making sure everything was ready for the next morning. Even on busy days, she was usually done before I got off work. If customers showed up too late, they were normally asked to return the next day. So when she did not answer at 10:30, I wondered what was taking so long. But I did not think much of it. I have never been the jealous type. I was not the kind of guy who immediately assumed my wife was cheating because she missed one phone call. I trusted her. 11 finally came. I clocked out and walked to my car. The drive home was normal. Nothing unusual happened. I remember thinking about taking a shower and maybe finding something small to eat before bed. When I reached our apartment complex, I pulled into my usual parking space. My wife normally parked directly beside me. Her space was empty. I noticed it, but again, I did not think anything serious. Maybe she had not made it home yet. I got out, locked my car, and walked upstairs. I unlocked the apartment door, and there she was. My wife was sitting on the couch. I remember feeling relieved. She was wearing her robe. Her hair was wet, like she had recently taken a shower. She looked like she had already been home for quite some time. At first, I smiled. I was happy to see her. Then, I remembered the empty parking space. I closed the door behind me. "Where's your car?" She looked at me. Not normally. There was something strange about the expression. It was not fear, not guilt, more like confusion, as if she had heard the words but did not understand what they meant. I waited. "Nothing, your car," I repeated. "It's not outside. I didn't even know you were home." She continued staring at me. Then something changed in her face. "Oh," she paused. "My car." I remember thinking that was weird. Not what she said, the way she said it. Like she had forgotten she owned one. Then she gave me a small smile. "Sorry, I thought you said something else. I had a flat tire, so I got a ride home." That explanation should have been enough. But immediately, a few things did not make sense. My wife kept a spare tire in the trunk. She knew how to change it herself. More importantly, she worked at a car dealership. There were mechanics everywhere. If she had a flat tire at work, she had probably picked the easiest possible place in the world to have one. One of the maintenance guys had once replaced her dead battery for free after her car would not start in the parking lot. So the idea that she would simply leave the car behind because of a flat tire seemed strange. Still, I did not accuse her of anything. I was tired. Maybe there was more to the story. Maybe the tire was damaged badly. Maybe the mechanics had already gone home. Maybe she just did not feel like dealing with it. I shrugged. "So how are you getting to work in the morning?" Again, she looked at me like I had asked something completely ridiculous. The same blank confusion. For a moment, I almost laughed. It looked like I had asked an unemployed person how they planned to get to work. Then she answered, "I can get another ride tomorrow. It's no big deal." That bothered me more. My wife was extremely organized. Sometimes annoyingly organized. If she needed to leave for work at 6 in the morning, she would make sure everything was arranged the night before. Clothes ready, lunch prepared, alarm set. Transportation confirmed. She hated last-minute problems. And now it was nearly midnight, and she was sitting there calmly saying she would just find a ride somehow in the morning. It did not feel like her. But she was an adult. She was responsible. She had never given me a reason not to trust her judgment, so I decided to leave it alone. I'm going to shower. She did not answer. I looked back at her. She was still sitting in the same position. I was too tired to repeat myself. I walked down the hallway and went into the bathroom. I turned on the shower and stepped inside. A few minutes later, I heard my phone ringing outside the shower curtain. I had left it on the bathroom counter. I ignored it. Whoever it was could wait until I finished. Then it rang again. That caught my attention. Still, I did not get out immediately. I finished washing, turned off the water, and stepped onto the bathroom mat. I picked up my phone, 2 missed calls, both from my wife. I stared at the screen. For a second, I thought maybe she had walked outside or gone downstairs. Then I remembered she had been sitting in the living room. I opened the bathroom door slightly. "Are you all right?" No answer. "I'm almost out. Give me a second." Silence. I dried myself, wrapped a towel around my waist, then walked into the living room. She was still there. Same place, same position, sitting on the couch. I held up my phone. "What is it?" She looked at me. I waited. "What did you need?" Again, that confused expression. Exactly the same one. She looked at the phone, then at me, as if she had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. By then, I was getting irritated. "You called me twice." "Nothing. Why are you acting like you don't know what I'm saying?" She still did not answer. I felt tired, annoyed, and honestly a little creeped out, although I would not admit that to myself at the time. I shook my head. "If you're just going to play dumb all night, I'm going to bed." Still nothing. I went into our bedroom. I got dressed. Then I climbed into bed. I remember lying there thinking we would probably argue in the morning. Maybe she was upset about something. Maybe she was trying to make a point. I did not know. About 3 minutes later, my phone rang again. I looked at the screen. My wife's contact picture appeared. I stared at it. For the first few seconds, I actually thought my phone was malfunctioning. Then irritation returned. I answered. "What?" There was a short pause. Then I heard her voice, her real voice. "What's your problem?" I sat up. "What?" "I'm just calling to let you know I just got off. I'm on my way home." Everything inside me went cold. I stopped breathing. She continued talking. "Hello?" I could hear her car in the background. Road noise. The turn signal clicking. Normal sounds. "I'm like 10 minutes away," she said. "What's wrong?" I did not answer. I got out of bed. My legs felt weak. The phone stayed against my ear as I walked toward the bedroom door. I stepped into the hallway, then into the living room. The couch was empty, completely empty. I stopped. I looked toward the kitchen. Nothing. Bathroom, nothing. Front door, still locked. I checked the apartment. She was gone. The robe was gone too. There was no wet towel, no sign anyone had taken a shower. Nothing. I felt like the room had changed around me. I could hear my own heartbeat. My wife was still talking through the phone. "What's wrong?" I tried to answer. Nothing came out. I walked back toward the couch. I touched the cushion where she had been sitting. I cannot remember whether it was warm. That detail has bothered me for years because I wish I could remember. "Are you there?" she asked. I still did not speak. After another few seconds, she sighed. "I'll just see you when I get home." Then she hung up. I stood in the middle of the living room holding my phone. 10 minutes. She had said she was 10 minutes away. I sat down. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 20. I called her. Or at least I thought about calling her. That is the part I still hate myself for. I wish I could say that I immediately called back. I did not. I was terrified. I kept thinking about the woman who had been sitting on my couch. The wet hair, the robe, the confused looks, the strange pauses before answering simple questions. I kept thinking about the fact that I had been alone in that apartment with something that looked exactly like my wife, something I had spoken to, something that knew enough to answer me. I convinced myself that my real wife would walk through the door any second. So I waited. 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. She never came home. Eventually, I called her phone. No answer. Again, no answer. Again, voicemail. I called the dealership. Closed, I called people she worked with. Nobody knew where she was. One person told me she had left work that night. Another said they thought she had left alone. I called the police. They took a report. I told them she had called me while driving home. I told them she had said she was 10 minutes away. I did not tell them about the other woman sitting on the couch. Not at first. How could I? What would I have said? My wife disappeared, but before she disappeared, something identical to her was already inside my apartment? I already sounded like a worried husband. I did not want to sound insane, too. The police checked the roads. They looked for her car. Eventually, they found it. But not where it should have been. It was not at the dealership. It was not parked near our apartment. It was found abandoned off a road several miles away. There were no obvious signs of an accident. No blood, no broken windows. Her purse was inside. Her phone was never found. Neither was she. For a long time, I tried to convince myself there had to be a normal explanation. Stress, exhaustion. Maybe I had fallen asleep after work and dreamed the whole thing. Maybe I saw her sitting on the couch because I expected her to be there, but that does not explain the conversation. I asked about her car. She answered. I asked how she would get to work. She answered again. Those were not dreams. At least, they did not feel like dreams. And there is something else I have never been able to forget. The woman on the couch did not seem angry. She did not seem dangerous. She seemed confused, almost like she was trying to understand how my wife was supposed to behave. When I asked about the car, she needed time to process the question. When I asked about work, the same thing happened. When I told her she had called me, she seemed to have no idea what a phone call was supposed to mean. It was like watching somebody learn a role while performing it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed in the living room. What if I had asked more questions? What if I had touched her? What if I had asked something only my wife could know? Would that thing have answered? Would it have become angry? Would it have changed? I do not know. But the worst question is still the simplest one. What if I had called my real wife back immediately? Maybe she would have answered. Maybe she would have told me where she was. Maybe I could have kept her talking until she reached home. Maybe I would have heard something happen. Maybe I could have called the police sooner. Maybe she would still be alive. That thought has followed me for years. People tell me I could not have known. They tell me I was scared. They tell me waiting 10 or 20 minutes probably did not change anything. That does not help. I was her husband. She told me she was 10 minutes away. And instead of calling back when she did not arrive, I sat there staring at the couch because I was afraid of something I could not explain. I still do not know what happened to her. No body was ever found. No clear suspect. No good explanation. Eventually, people stopped searching as much. Cases get older. Resources move elsewhere. Life keeps going for everyone except the people left behind. Her children grew up without her. Her family still asks questions nobody can answer. And I still think about that night. I think about the wet hair, the robe, the blank expression. I think about the way she looked at me when I asked where her car was. Like the question was unexpected, like she had not prepared for it. Sometimes I wonder if whatever was sitting there knew that the real version of my wife was still alive. Maybe it was waiting for something. Maybe it was replacing her. Maybe she had already encountered it before calling me. I have no idea. I moved out of that apartment not long afterward. I could not stay there. Every time I walked into the living room, I expected to see her sitting on the couch again. Sometimes, even now, if I wake up late at night, I still picture that room exactly as it was. Dark television, small lamp in the corner, couch against the wall. My wife sitting there with wet hair, staring at me. Except now I notice details I ignored at the time. How still she was, how little she moved, how she never smiled when I came through the door. My wife always smiled when I came home, even after arguments, even when she was tired. That woman did not. She just watched me. I also realized later that I never actually saw her blink. Maybe she did. I cannot say for sure. Memory changes after years. I do not want to invent things just because they make the story scarier. I am only telling you what I remember. I remember coming home. I remember seeing my wife. I remember speaking to her. I remember hearing my phone ring while she sat in the next room. And I remember answering a call from the real woman while something wearing her face was already inside my home. For years, I have questioned whether I somehow imagined it. Maybe grief created a false memory. Maybe exhaustion did. Maybe there is some medical explanation for seeing and talking to a person who was not really there. I would almost prefer that. At least then I could blame my own brain. But deep down, I do not believe that is what happened. Something was sitting on that couch. Something looked exactly like my wife. And whatever it was, it disappeared the moment the real one called me. I still have one of the old photos from our apartment. It was taken months before that night. My wife is sitting on the same couch. Her kids are beside her. Everyone is smiling. I keep the picture in a drawer. I do not display it, because whenever I look at it, I remember that night. And I find myself comparing the woman in the photograph to the woman I saw sitting there after work. Same face, same hair, same voice. Almost the same person. Almost, but not quite. My wife disappeared after calling me from the road. I never saw her again, and I still do not know what happened to her. But if the woman speaking to me on the phone that night really was my wife, then there is one question I have never been able to answer. Who came home before she did? Most haunted houses have a name. They usually come with a story, too. Maybe an old man murdered his family there. Maybe a child disappeared in one of the bedrooms. Maybe someone hanged themselves in the attic and people still hear footsteps at night. Our house never had anything like that. Nobody called it the Miller House or the Blackwood Place or anything dramatic. Everyone simply called it the house. That was enough. Our village in rural Nottinghamshire was small, and there was not much going on there. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew exactly which building you meant when you said those two words. The house stood near the edge of the village beside an old library that had been built sometime in the 1970s. The library was a low, ugly concrete building that only opened 3 days a week by the time we were teenagers. The house looked completely out of place beside it. It was a detached Victorian home made of red brick, tall and narrow, with large windows and a steep roof. According to my parents, There had once been an entire street of houses around it, but the others were knocked down years ago when the area was redeveloped. For some reason, that one survived. It had a large garden enclosed by a tall fence, unlike most of the older houses in our village, which had small gardens facing the road. And covering almost the entire building was a massive wisteria plant. If you have never seen wisteria before, it is a climbing plant. It starts off looking harmless, but once it becomes established, it grows aggressively. Thick branches wrap around walls, pipes, windows, anything they can reach. The wisteria on the house was enormous. Its trunk was thicker than some small trees. During summer, purple flowers covered the walls. From a distance, it was actually beautiful. That made it worse, because everyone knew the house was dangerous. Not haunted, exactly. Dangerous, it was not only children spreading stories to scare each other. Adults avoided it too. Even the youngest people in our year at school knew about Molly Haynes. Molly had broken into the house on a dare several years earlier. She never came back out. Before Molly, there were the Drosta siblings. They had apparently climbed through a side window about a year before I was born. Nobody ever saw them again, either. The police searched the house after both incidents. Nothing. No bodies. No blood. No sign that anyone had been hurt. According to the police, the disappearances were probably unrelated. According to the adults in the village, the house was simply somewhere children should stay away from. When I was little, my older sister had a different explanation. She told me the house was alive, not haunted. Alive, she said it was a huge sleeping monster pretending to be a building, and if anyone stepped across the doorway, it would wake up and eat them. For years, I believed her. Then I got older. I stopped believing in monsters. I started believing in ghosts instead. Eventually, I stopped believing in those too. That is what happens when you become a teenager. You decide that fear is embarrassing. That is why, when Olivia received the dare, everyone suddenly went quiet. There were 4 of us in our group: Olivia, Amrit, Callum, and me. That summer, we had been competing with stupid dares for about a month. Nothing serious. Knock on someone's door and run away. Steal washing from somebody's clothesline and put it on someone else's. Sneak Callum's parents' chickens into the library. Normal stupid things teenagers do when they live somewhere boring and have too much free time. Olivia was usually the one pushing things further. She had somehow made herself the leader of our group. Amrit was the peaceful one. Callum was shy. I suppose I was the funny one, although whether anyone actually found me funny is another question. Olivia was bossy. She could also be cruel. A few days before the dare, she had made fun of my little sister's hair until my sister went home crying. I was still angry about it. So when it was my turn to choose a dare, I looked directly at Olivia. Go into the garden of the house. The words came out before I had properly thought about them. Nobody laughed. That should have been my warning. I continued anyway. Get into the back garden without anyone seeing you, then come back. Still silence. Then, trying to sound funnier than I felt, I added, alive. Amrit immediately shook her head. We're not doing that. Olivia looked at her. Why not? Because it's not fair. Olivia rolled her eyes. You think I'm scared of the pigs? She had recently learned from some television show that people called police officers pigs, and she had started using the word whenever possible. Callum looked uncomfortable. The fence has barbed wire, he said quietly, and it's like 20 feet high. For a second, I thought Olivia was going to refuse. Honestly, I hoped she would. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I had only wanted to embarrass her. I had not expected her to actually do it. I was already preparing to laugh and tell her I would think of something else when her expression changed. She smiled. Okay, Emmerich stared at her. Olivia, I've got an idea. Then she pointed at all of us. But you have to help. That was how, at around 8 that evening, the four of us ended up standing outside the house. It was summer, so the sun had not fully set. The sky was still bright enough to see clearly, but long shadows stretched across the road. The heat of the day still rose from the tarmac. There was nobody around. The library was closed. Most people lived further inside the village. That part of town felt completely empty. The house looked worse up close. All the doors and ground floor windows had been covered with boards. Several upstairs windows were broken. The wisteria spread across nearly everything. Branches twisted around drain pipes. Leaves covered bricks. Purple flowers hung in thick bunches. In places, the plant was so dense that you could barely see the house underneath. Olivia took off her backpack and started searching through it. I felt nervous immediately. You're not climbing through a window, are you? I tried to make it sound like a joke. She looked at me. Obviously not. I'm not fucking thick. We had all recently discovered swearing and used it far more often than necessary. But when Olivia looked at me, I noticed something beneath the confidence. Fear, only a little. But it was there, and I think she wanted me to notice. She wanted me to remember that I had put her in this situation. From her bag, she removed a pair of thick gloves and a large picnic blanket. One side of the blanket was covered in plastic. She handed it to Emmerich and Callum. You two stand there. Then she pointed toward the bottom of the wall. Hold it out. They understood before I did. I stepped backwards with my phone because my job was to film everything. Olivia looked up at the wisteria. Then she smiled. It only gets you if you go inside, right? She tried to sound sarcastic. But it was really a question. None of us knew the answer. Still, we nodded. Olivia looked satisfied. Right, watch this. She grabbed one of the thick lower branches and pulled herself upward. At first, I thought she would make it only a few feet. Instead, she climbed quickly. The wisteria was almost like a ladder. Thick branches crossed each other and pushed away from the brick wall, leaving enough space for hands and feet. Olivia tested each branch before trusting her weight to it. Then, she climbed higher. And higher. When she reached the level of the first floor, Emmerich and Callum stretched the blanket beneath her. The blanket would not have saved her from that height. We all knew it. But holding it made them feel useful. Olivia continued climbing. She moved surprisingly well, like she had done it before. At the halfway point, she looked down. I'll go over the roof, she called. Emmerich immediately looked up and down the road. Olivia continued. I'll climb down into the garden, shout so you know I'm there, then come back the same way. Just come down, Emmerich said. Olivia ignored her. Don't drop the blanket. Callum tightened his grip. So did Emmerich. The plastic underside stretched so tightly I thought it might tear. Olivia climbed higher. Eventually, all I could see clearly were the white soles of her trainers. Her head was almost level with the gutter when she suddenly made a sharp sound. Ow, Emmerich looked up. What? Callum hissed at her to keep her voice down. Olivia shook one hand. Nothing, Splinter. She reached for another branch. Then cried out again. This time she grabbed her ankle. I moved closer. Something about that bothered me. She had already climbed most of the wall. Why would she suddenly start getting splinters now? Before I could say anything, Olivia slapped the side of her face. Hard, the sound reached us from the ground. Are you okay? Emmerich called. Callum did not tell her to be quiet this time. He was staring upward with his mouth open. Olivia started scratching her neck. Then, her stomach. Her shirt had lifted slightly while she climbed, exposing a strip of skin. She scratched at that too. She stopped. What? I shouted. Callum squinted. Bees, maybe. Olivia heard him. It's not wasps. She scratched frantically at her arm. They're splinters. What? They're coming out of the wood. Another sharp cry. Her hand flew behind her knee. Then her right arm twisted suddenly. Her feet slipped. For one terrible second, Olivia hung by one hand. Amrit screamed. Callum and Amrit stretched the blanket underneath her. My stomach dropped. Then Olivia managed to get her foot onto another branch. She held still, breathing hard. I remember saying her name. She looked down at me. Then she called my name. Her voice had that familiar tone. Sarcastic, annoyed, she was about to insult me. Even then, I could tell. Maybe she was going to say that my stupid dare was almost finished. Maybe she was going to tell me that when she got down, I was next. I will never know. She reached upward. There was only one more large branch between her and the gutter. To reach it, she had to press herself closer to the wall. Her chest almost touched the wisteria. Then we heard the sound. It was not one splinter. It was hundreds. A rapid series of sharp impacts, like darts hitting a dartboard. Thwack, 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 over and over at impossible speed. Olivia's jumper tightened against her arms. Something had shot from the branches into her clothes, into her skin. She screamed, not the playful scream of someone being startled, a real scream. The kind of sound that makes your body react before your mind understands what is happening. Her arms flew away from the wall. Her feet lost their grip. She fell backwards. I screamed too. Amrit screamed. Callum shouted her name. But Olivia never hit the ground. She stopped in midair. For several seconds, none of us understood what we were seeing. Her body was leaning backwards at an angle. Something held her there. Then, I saw it. Branches. A thick mass of wisteria had grown behind her. Not branches that had already been there. New ones. They had wrapped themselves together into something like the back of a chair. They were supporting her body, holding her against the wall. Nobody moved. Olivia did not move either. There are strange things your mind notices when it cannot understand what your eyes are seeing. For me, it was the blood. One of Olivia's hands hung down. A thin line of blood ran from her fingers. Drop, drop, drop. The drops hit the picnic blanket below. Amrit and Callum had let go of it without realizing. It lay crumpled on the pavement. Olivia, my voice sounded very small. She looked down at me. Come down. For a moment, she did nothing. Then she nodded. That matters to me, even now. She nodded. She wanted to come down. She was going to try. Then the branch behind her tightened. It happened instantly, like a fist closing. Olivia was thrown forward into the wall. Another burst of those sharp impacts filled the air. She screamed again. Amrit grabbed the blanket from the ground and stretched it out beneath her, as if that could still help. Callum stared upward for 1 second. Then he turned and ran. I'm getting help. His voice disappeared down the road. Amrit stayed. So did I. I wish I had run too. Then I would not have seen the rest. Another branch moved. Then another. Then another. They came from the main trunk with deep wooden creaks. At first, they moved slowly, then faster. The bark split open as new branches pushed through it. Not normal growth. Growth that should have taken months happened in seconds. Thin shoots became thick branches. Those branches divided. Then divided again. They curled around Olivia's back, around her arms, around her legs. They connected with one another like fingers weaving together. Then small bumps appeared across the new wood. The bumps opened. Leaves unfolded. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Within seconds, Olivia was almost hidden. I could still see her brown hair above the branches. I could see her hands pressed against the bricks. She tried to push herself away from the wall. The branches tightened. They pressed through her jacket. Her clothes sank into her body. I expected blood. There should have been blood everywhere. But there was almost none. That confused me more than anything. The branches were clearly going into her. I could see deep lines forming in her skin where the wood pressed against her body. Her scream became quieter, muffled, as if the bark itself was closing around her mouth. Emrit was crying beside me. I barely noticed. I could not look away. At first, I was trying to understand where Olivia's body ended and the plant began. Then I realized that was becoming impossible. Her hands changed first. Her fingers looked longer, too long. The tips narrowed. The skin lost its normal color. It became yellowish-brown. At first, I thought the light was changing because the sun was setting. Then lines appeared across her skin, small cracks. They spread across her fingers. Up her hands, across her wrists. Her fingers stiffened, then divided. One finger became two thin shoots, another bent at an impossible angle and hardened. Leaves pushed out from its side. I looked at Olivia's face. Her hair was disappearing, not falling out, becoming part of the surface beneath it. Brown strands pulled inward. The skin of her forehead changed color. Cracks spread across it. The shape of her skull began to disappear under thick ridges. Her forehead became a knot in the wood. Her cheeks flattened. Her nose was swallowed by bark. I could still see her mouth for a few seconds. It opened. I thought she was trying to scream again. No sound came out. Then the lips disappeared, not covered. Gone, the skin where her mouth had been became smooth, then brown, then cracked. I remember thinking she was suffocating. But there was no mouth left to breathe through. Her arms stretched outward, the elbows bent. Then the arms split. Branches pushed out from where her hands had been. Leaves unfolded. Her red jumper became trapped inside the wood. Then, even that disappeared. Bits of fabric folded inward as the bark grew over them. Her hair came away in small clumps. Each clump hardened into a dark ridge on the plant. Emrit was screaming Olivia's name now. I still could not move. Then, I saw her eye. Only one was still visible. Everything else had become part of the wisteria. That one eye looked down at me. I swear it did. Maybe that is the part people think I invented. Maybe that is the part the police thought was my mind trying to deal with what happened. But I know what I saw. Olivia's eye looked directly at me. It blinked once, then again. It was terrified. It was pleading. And for 1 second, I had the horrible feeling that she was still completely conscious inside whatever was happening. Then the eye became cloudy. The white faded. The pupil disappeared. A small purple shape pushed outward from the place where the eye had been. A flower. It opened slowly. Then another flower appeared beside it. Then another. Within seconds, purple blooms spread across the new branches. They covered everything. The outline of Olivia vanished beneath them. There was no longer a girl against the wall. There was only wisteria. More wisteria than before. Thicker, greener, covered in brilliant purple flowers. Emrit grabbed my arm. I do not remember leaving. I remember adults arriving. I remember Callum returning with people from the village. I remember police cars. I remember someone wrapping a blanket around Emrit. I remember an officer asking me again and again where Olivia had gone. I pointed at the wall. Nobody understood. The plant. That was all I could say. The plant took her. The police obviously did not believe our story. I cannot blame them. What would you think? 3 terrified teenagers claimed their friend was pulled into a climbing plant and turned into part of it. Callum had run before most of it happened. Emrit saw some of it, but she had been crying and looking away. I was the only person who watched the entire thing. My phone should have helped. I had been recording at the beginning. But once Olivia started screaming, I forgot about the phone. The video showed her climbing. It showed her stopping. It showed some movement above. Then the camera pointed toward the pavement because my arm dropped. Mostly, it recorded screams. Nothing useful. The police searched the property. They searched the garden. They searched inside the house. No Olivia. No body. No blood. No torn clothes. Nothing. They looked at the wisteria, too. But nobody had a clear photograph showing exactly what the plant had looked like before that night. It had always covered most of the house. So how could we prove it had changed? The official explanation was never very satisfying. I do not think the police believed we were deliberately lying. Maybe they thought Olivia had fallen somewhere, and we panicked. Maybe they thought she had run away, and we invented the story because we felt guilty. Maybe they believed shock had changed our memories. I do not know. The house is still there. Years have passed. Nobody has knocked it down. Apparently, there's still some legal problem involving ownership of the property and distant relatives. I do not fully understand it. I am studying law now, partly because one day I intend to understand exactly who owns that place. I moved away for university. Different city. Different life. Most of the year, I can pretend the house is something that happened to another person. Then Christmas comes. Or summer. And I return home. Every time I do, I walk past it. The library looks smaller than I remember. The road looks ordinary. The house does not. The wisteria has continued growing. There is less visible brick every year. Branches cover more of the windows. The trunk is thicker. The flowers are brighter. Summer is the worst, because that is when it blooms. Right now, I am home from university. It is summer. Yesterday, I walked past the house again. I stood on the opposite side of the road for several minutes. Purple flowers covered almost the entire front wall. Beautiful flowers. People passing through the village probably think the place looks romantic. Old Victorian brick, wild garden, purple wisteria. They do not know. I found the place where we had stood that evening. The place where Amrit and Callum held the blanket. The place where I stood filming. At first, everything looked like random branches. Then, I squinted, and there she was. Once you know what you are looking for, it becomes impossible not to see her. A curve in the branches forms a shoulder. Another forms a leg. Two long branches stretch outward like arms. One leg seems lifted, exactly as it had been when she reached toward the gutter. Near the center, surrounded by purple flowers, there is a knot in the wood shaped almost like a face. And if the sun is in the right position, there is a small, dark mark where one eye would be. I stood there longer than I should have, looking at it, looking at her. I kept thinking about the moment she nodded when I told her to come down. She wanted to come back. She trusted us to help her, and I was the one who dared her to climb that wall. One day, when I finish university and earn enough money, I am going to find whoever owns that property. I do not care if it is a company, an estate agent, or some distant relative who has never even visited Nottinghamshire. I will make them an offer. If they refuse, I will offer more. I will keep going until that house belongs to me. Then I will make sure nobody can ever enter it again. And after that, I am going to burn it. The roof, the walls, the garden, every branch, every leaf, every purple flower. Everything I know, people will tell me that burning the plant will not bring Olivia back. Maybe they are right. But sometimes, when I stand across the road and look carefully at those branches, I can still see the shape of a girl pressed into the side of the house. arms stretched outward, one leg raised, her body frozen in the middle of a climb she never finished. And if I stare long enough at the flowers around the place where her face should be, I can almost convince myself that one of them is watching me, waiting, still pleading for me to help her come down. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. My name is John, and I work as a game warden in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. I know, not exactly glamorous work. Most days are long, cold, and boring, and the people I deal with are usually angry before I even start talking to them. Still, someone has to do it, and most of the time I actually like being out there. The only reason my job matters to this story is that what happened took place while I was using up my paid time off before it reset at the beginning of the year. I have been nervous about telling anyone this. Even now, writing it down makes me feel stupid. But 2 winters ago, something happened near my cabin that I still cannot explain. I live alone in a very isolated part of the Upper Peninsula. Without snow, the nearest real town is about an hour and a half away. With heavy winter snow, forget it. Depending on how bad the roads get, nobody is reaching my place until the weather improves. Normally, that is exactly why I like living there. My job already involves dealing with people, arguments, regulations, hunters who pretend they cannot read signs, and people who swear they had no idea a rifle was loaded. When I get home, I want silence. My cabin is surrounded by forest. At night, I can sit outside with coffee and hear almost nothing except wind moving through the trees. Sometimes you hear branches cracking, sometimes an owl, sometimes deer moving through the brush. When you work outdoors for long enough, you stop being frightened by every strange sound. You learn that nature does weird things. I have seen deer stand upright on their back legs longer than seems normal. I have seen entire groups of deer freeze and stare at the same section of woods without moving. The first time you see something like that, it feels unnatural. Then you remember disease exists. Chronic wasting disease can make deer behave strangely. Predators can make whole herds stare toward one direction. Injury, sickness, fear, bad weather. There is usually an explanation. You spend enough years outdoors, and you learn not to turn every strange thing into a ghost story. I have also found illegal hunting camps, hidden stills, abandoned boats in places where nobody should have been boating, and vehicles left deep in the woods with no obvious owner. People can be stranger than animals. That is why I have always tried to stay practical. Whatever you see, find the explanation. That worked for most of my life. Then came that winter. It had snowed heavily for several days. I was taking some time off and had nowhere I needed to be. I had enough food, plenty of firewood, coffee, fuel, and a rifle. For me, that was almost perfect. That first evening, I was sitting on my porch with a mug in my hands. It was cold enough that the steam rose thick in front of my face. The forest beyond the cabin looked black between the trees. Snow reflected a little moonlight, so I could see the first 50 yards or so fairly well. Beyond that, everything disappeared. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard whistling. At first, I barely paid attention. I assumed someone was walking through the woods. That would have been unusual, but not impossible. Then, I recognized the tune. A hunting we will go. It was an old children's song. I remembered hearing it when I was little. A-hunting we will go. A-hunting we will go. The whistle came slowly from somewhere near the tree line. I sat there listening. The melody continued almost perfectly until it reached the final part, where the song should have finished with the line about catching something and then letting it go. The whistling stopped, not faded. Stopped right before that part. I lowered my cup. For several seconds, the woods were completely silent again. My first thought was poachers. It was deer season, and illegal hunters coming onto private property was not exactly unheard of. Hunting at that hour would have been illegal. Hunting on my land without permission was definitely illegal. Normally, I would have grabbed a flashlight and gone to investigate. But something about the way the whistle stopped made me uncomfortable. I cannot explain why. Maybe it was because whoever was out there had chosen a hunting song. Maybe it was because they stopped at exactly the wrong part. Whatever it was, I decided I was not going into the woods. I went inside. I put more wood into the stove. I checked every window, locked both doors. Then I brought my rifle into the bedroom and placed it beside the bed. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Probably some hunter had crossed onto the property. Maybe they had seen the cabin and left. Maybe the whistle had come from farther away than I thought. Sound travels strangely over snow. I knew all that. Still, I slept badly. Every time the cabin creaked, I opened my eyes. Morning finally came. I waited until there was good light before going outside. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and headed toward the place where I believed the whistling had come from. Fresh snow covered most of the ground. I expected to find tracks, boot prints, snowshoe marks, maybe deer tracks. Anything. I found nothing. No human footprints. No obvious animal trail. For a moment, I started feeling stupid. Then I found the leg. It was a deer foreleg, just lying in the snow. There was no body nearby. I walked a little farther. Then I found part of the stomach and intestines hanging across some low branches. Another piece was farther away. Then another. The farther I walked, the more of the deer I found. It was scattered through the woods. Not eaten. Scattered eventually. I found the head. The skull had been smashed against a tree. Blood and pieces of brain had frozen onto the bark. I stood there longer than I want to admit. I have seen dead animals my entire career. I have found animals hit by trucks, animals shot badly and left wounded, animals torn apart by wolves, animals partly eaten by coyotes. I have seen things most people would probably find disgusting. This was different. I almost threw up. The violence made no sense. A predator kills because it needs food. Even if the kill looks brutal, there is a purpose. This deer had been destroyed. Pieces were spread through the woods for no reason I could understand. A person could do something like that, but I could not imagine why. And if a person had done it, where were the tracks? I went back to the cabin. I did not feel comfortable anymore. That second evening, I sat on the porch again. Same chair, same coffee. But this time, my rifle rested across my lap. I watched the tree line. For a long time, nothing happened. Then something moved. At first, I thought it was a branch shifting in the wind. Then it moved again, sideways, through the trees. I raised my head. Whatever it was stayed inside the forest. It never stepped fully into the open. That made it difficult to see. The first thing I understood was its height. It was tall, very tall. Then I realized how thin it was. Its arms and legs were so long and narrow that if it had stayed still, I might have mistaken them for young tree trunks. Its body was narrow too. The ribs seemed to sink inward instead of pushing outward. Its skin looked pale beneath the moonlight. Not normal pale. Ash white. There was something dark covering the front of its chest. As it moved closer to a patch of reflected snowlight, I realized the dark color was red. Blood. At least I assumed it was blood. I sat completely still. The thing moved between the trees. Fast, too fast for something built like that. Tall, thin creatures should move awkwardly. This one almost seemed to slide between the trunks. Then it stopped and started singing. Not whistling, singing, "A hunting we will go." I nearly dropped my coffee. The voice sounded human enough that I understood the words, but only barely. It was low, scratchy, gravelly, like something forcing sound through a throat that had not been designed for human speech. "A hunting we will go," the words came slowly, painfully. Then the song reached the same point and stopped. Again, right before the line about letting him go, I lifted my rifle, very slowly. Every part of my body was shaking, but training took over. I raised the scope to my eye. The creature moved behind a tree, then stepped partially into view. I aimed where I believed its heart should be. I breathed out, put my finger on the trigger, and fired. The rifle cracked through the woods. Then came the scream. I have heard injured animals make sounds I wish I could forget. Nothing sounded like that. The creature released a long, horrible wail, high at first, then low, then something between a scream and a growl. It echoed through the trees. I worked the rifle again, fired another round. The thing jerked. It should have fallen. It did not. That was when I realized something worse. There was no blood. I had hit it. I knew I had. The first shot should have been enough to drop most animals in North America. The second should have finished anything still standing. Yet this thing remained upright. It stopped screaming. Then slowly turned toward me. For the first time, I saw its face clearly. The neck was thicker than the rest of its body. That looked wrong immediately. Everything else was thin and starved looking, but its neck was heavy and powerful. Its mouth was enormous, too wide. The jaw seemed to open farther than a human jaw should. Something wet and red covered its lips and chin. Its eyes were round. Huge, they looked almost absurdly large, like white dinner plates set into a thin face. And those eyes were looking directly at me. The creature did not charge. It did not run. It simply stared. Its chest rose and fell. I kept the rifle aimed at it. We stayed that way for what felt like forever. Neither of us moved. Then the sky began to lighten, just a little. The first hint of morning appeared behind the trees. The creature reacted instantly. It dropped onto all fours. That movement was somehow worse than seeing it upright. Its limbs bent in ways that made it look almost spider-like. Then it disappeared into the forest. Not ran. Disappeared, it moved so fast that within seconds there was nothing there. I stayed on the porch until the sun was fully up. After that, I decided I had seen enough. Whatever the thing was, this was no longer something I wanted to handle myself. I planned to call the sheriff's department. I had no idea what I expected them to do. What exactly was I supposed to say? Hello, I shot a 7-foot white thing in the woods and it ignored 2 rounds from a .45-70? Still, I needed someone else there. I went inside. That was when I discovered the power was out. Normally, that is nothing unusual during winter. Snow brings trees down, lines go out. It happens. I had a backup generator, or at least I thought I did. I walked outside to check it. The generator was destroyed, not damaged. Destroyed, the metal casing had been ripped open. Deep marks cut across the sides. Parts had been thrown several feet into the snow. Wires hung loose. One piece of the frame had been bent outward like someone had peeled open a can. I stood there, staring at it. Then I understood. The thing had been at my cabin after sunrise, or sometime during the night. It knew where the generator was. Maybe it understood what it did. Maybe it just knew I used it. Either way, it had destroyed my easiest way to contact anyone. I was trapped. The snow was already deep. More was coming. Driving out would have been extremely dangerous. Walking was impossible. Nobody was coming to me either. Not soon. Whatever that thing was, it had me alone. So I prepared. I started with bear traps. I had several stored in an outbuilding. I set them along likely approaches near the tree line. I knew there was a good chance they would do nothing. If two, 45-70 rounds had barely affected the creature, a steel trap probably was not going to kill it. But maybe it would slow it down. While I worked, I constantly felt watched. I kept turning toward the trees. Nothing. Still, I knew it was there. Or at least, I believed it was. Sometimes you can feel when an animal is watching you. Your body notices before your mind understands why. That feeling stayed with me the entire day. After the traps were set, I started thinking less like a game warden and more like an idiot from a horror movie. I poured salt across the entrances. Yes, salt. I did not know what this thing was. Maybe folklore had gotten something right. Maybe salt mattered. Maybe it did not. At that point, I was willing to try anything. Then I searched the cabin for anything else I could use. Under the bathroom sink, I found an old can of hairspray. I took a lighter, hairspray, and flame. Crude, dangerous, probably stupid. But I remembered something important. The creature had not bled. Bullets hurt it enough to make it scream, but they had not killed it. Fire was different. Most living things fear fire. So that became my backup plan. Rifle first, fire second. Then I waited. The afternoon passed slowly. The sky darkened. The forest became black. I sat inside near the front window with the rifle ready. Eventually, the song began. A hunting we will go. I froze. The voice sounded different. Better, clearer. It was still wrong. But it no longer sounded like something struggling to produce human words. It had improved. That scared me more than the first time. It was learning. A hunting we will go, the song continued. Then stopped. Same place. Always the same place. Never the line about letting the animal go. I do not know what happened inside my head next. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe I was terrified and tired of waiting. Maybe anger finally became stronger than fear. Whatever the reason, I opened the door and shouted into the darkness. Then come at me, you bastard. My voice echoed into the trees. Stop pussyfooting around A&D trying to scare ME. For half a second, I almost stopped. Then, I shouted again, come fucking get ME. The instant the words left my mouth, I regretted them. There were around 200 yards between my cabin and the place where I had last seen movement. It crossed that distance in less than 10 seconds. I barely understood what I was seeing. Something pale exploded from between the trees. It did not slow down. One of the traps snapped shut. I heard the metal close. The creature screamed but kept coming. I fired. Once, again, I think the first round struck its shoulder. The next hit near its head. It kept moving. I backed toward the cabin. Fired again. Then I was inside. I slammed the door. The creature hit it almost immediately. The entire wall shook. Wood cracked. I stepped backward. Another impact. The door frame split. Then a long, pale arm came through. The hand was huge. The fingers were too long. They reached blindly into the cabin. I fired through the door. The creature screamed, then pulled harder. Part of the door tore away. Its face appeared through the opening. Those huge eyes, that enormous mouth. I remember thinking very clearly that I was going to die. Not maybe, not possibly. I was going to die in my cabin. Whatever this thing was, it was coming inside. But I also remember becoming angry. If I was going to die, I was not going to sit there and let it pull me apart like that deer. I dropped the rifle long enough to grab the hairspray. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the lighter. The creature pushed farther through the broken door. I flicked the lighter. Nothing again. A flame appeared. I held it in front of the spray can, then pressed the nozzle. Fire burst toward the doorway. The flame hit the creature's face and upper body. It screamed, not like before. This was pure panic. It pulled backward. I sprayed again. The fire caught the broken wood around the door. Then it caught the creature. Its pale skin lit almost instantly, like dry brush. It shrieked and twisted. Through the broken doorway, I watched it stumble into the snow. Its arms beat at its body. For the first time, it looked afraid, really afraid. It fell, convulsed, then dragged itself away from the cabin. The flames followed it into the darkness. I had my own problem then. Part of the front wall was burning. I spent the next several minutes putting out the fire before it spread through the cabin. I used snow, water, anything I could grab. By the time everything was under control, the creature was gone. I did not go after it. Not a chance. I stayed inside until morning. I kept the rifle beside me. I did not sleep. When daylight finally came, I stepped outside. The front of the cabin was damaged. The door was partly destroyed. Several boards were blackened by fire. There were deep marks in the wood where the creature had clawed through. The snow near the porch was disturbed. There were burned patches leading toward the trees. I followed them only as far as the edge of the forest. Then I stopped. I could smell something burned farther inside. Something like hair mixed with rotten meat. I did not investigate. I had already learned enough about curiosity. Once conditions improved and I could finally contact people again, I reported the damaged generator and the cabin. I did not tell the full story. What would I have said? I still do not know what that creature was. I do not know if the fire killed it. I never found a body. Maybe it crawled deep into the woods and died. Maybe it survived. Maybe it simply decided I was not worth the trouble anymore. I have heard people use names for creatures like that. I am not going to. Names make people comfortable. Once something has a name, they can pretend they understand it. I do not understand what I saw. I only know what happened. A deer was torn apart. Something watched my cabin from the trees. It sang a hunting song. It learned to sing better. It survived rifle rounds that should have killed it. It destroyed my generator. Then it tried to come through my front door. And it was afraid of fire. That was 2 winters ago. I still live in the same area. I repaired the cabin, bought another generator, replaced the door. I also added stronger exterior lights. A lot stronger. Most nights are normal again. I sit on the porch. I drink coffee. I watch snow fall through the light. But things are different now. I do not walk beyond the reach of those lights after dark. Not during winter, especially not alone. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees in the right way, it almost sounds like whistling. Whenever that happens, I stop whatever I am doing and listen. I wait for the melody. A hunting we will go. A hunting we will go. So far, it has never returned. Not once. And I hope I never hear it again. Because there is one part of that old song I cannot listen to anymore. The ending. The part about catching something. And then letting it go. Whatever was living in those woods knew the song. It knew every note. It knew every word. But for some reason, it always stopped before that final line. And after what I saw it do to that deer, I think I understand why. It never intended to let anything go. My name is James Morrow, but to the state of Florida, I am offender 779854. I made some bad choices in my life. I am not going to pretend otherwise. Those choices eventually put me in an orange safety vest on the side of US 301, south of Stark, Florida, completing court-ordered community service. The work was disgusting, but it was not difficult. We picked up dead animals. That was basically the whole job. There were 5 of us assigned to the crew. 6 if you counted Vasquez, our supervisor. Vasquez drove the county truck, kept track of our hours, filled out the paperwork, and made sure nobody wandered off before the shift was over. Most mornings, we drove slowly along the shoulder while the rest of us watched the road. Whenever we saw something dead, Vasquez stopped. Then one of us got out with a grabber pole, thick gloves, and heavy contractor bags. Most of what we found was deer. There were plenty of possums and armadillos, too, sometimes raccoons. Every few weeks, we would find a dog, and those were always worse, because some of them still had collars around their necks. Reyes was the one who taught me how to handle those. He had more community service hours left than the rest of us combined, so he had been doing the work longer than anybody. Check the collar first, he told me during my first week. Then breathe through your mouth. I thought he was joking about the second part. He was not. The smell of an animal that has been sitting beside a Florida highway for several hours is difficult to explain to someone who has never experienced it. Heat makes everything worse. The smell gets into your clothes, your hair, even your skin. At first, I gagged almost every time we opened a bag. After 3 days, I barely noticed it. That surprised me. Human beings can get used to almost anything. There was only one part of the job I never got used to. At the end of every shift, we took everything to the county incinerator. At least, that was what everyone called it. The building sat about a quarter-mile off US 301 behind a chain-link fence. It was a long green metal structure with a smokestack rising from the roof and a heavy steel chute built into one side. We would back the truck toward the chute and unload the bags one at a time. I probably stood beside that building more than 100 times. There were 2 things about it that bothered me from my first week. The first was the smokestack. It never smoked. Not once. We could feed 10 bags into the chute or 40, and nothing ever came out of the stack. The second thing was the wall. It was always cold. Florida afternoons can become hot enough to make the metal on a parked car painful to touch. That green building sat directly under the sun for hours, but you could press your hand flat against the wall and the metal would feel cool. Not cool compared with the air. Cold, like a pipe pulling water from deep underground. I discovered something else about the wall by accident. If you kept your palm against it long enough, sometimes you could feel movement on the other side. Not machinery. At least it never felt like machinery. Something would slowly slide past beneath the metal, then disappear. I asked Reyes about it once. He told me to stop touching the building. That was all. Vasquez kept a record of everything we put down the chute. Every bag. He wrote down the weight, the contents, and the mile marker where we found it. At first, I assumed it was normal government paperwork. State jobs have forms for everything. But after watching him long enough, I realized there was something strange about the way he filled out those sheets. He did not treat them like paperwork. He treated them like numbers that mattered. Every time we unloaded, he checked the weights carefully. Sometimes he added the numbers twice, sometimes 3 times. He looked like a man balancing a bank account after discovering that money had gone missing once before. The crew itself was simple enough. Reyes was probably the best person there. He had enough hours left that he could have been angry every day, but he never was. He shared coffee from his thermos and once covered for me after I made a mistake counting bags. Then there was Hutto. Hutto was from Palatka. Skinny guy, nervous energy, always talking. More than anything, Hutto talked about his remaining hours. He knew the exact number at all times. 212. 198. 143. He announced every reduction like he was counting down the days until release from prison. The number meant freedom to him. You could almost see the door getting closer every time he said it. The chute itself had a heavy steel lid. You lifted it with one hand while throwing the bag inside with the other. The hinge was stiff, and once you released the lid, gravity brought it down with enough force to create a loud metallic clang. You could feel that clang through your teeth. That became the rhythm of the job. Bag, log, lift, throw, clang. Again, most days, nothing unusual happened, except for the apron. The concrete area directly beneath the chute was what Vasquez called the apron. Sometimes, when we arrived in the morning, things would be sitting there. Small things, mostly. Dog collars, metal tags, pieces of chain. Once, we found about 3 feet of chain laid perfectly straight across the concrete. None of us remembered putting it there. Whatever happened inside that building did not accept everything. Some things came back. Vasquez called them rejects. He used a rake to collect whatever was lying on the apron. Then he put the rejects into another contractor bag. Then he fed them back into the chute. I remember thinking that was stupid. If the machine had rejected something once, why put it back in? But I did not ask. Community service teaches you quickly that asking fewer questions makes the hours move faster. About 3 weeks after I joined the crew, we found the first animal that made me realize something was seriously wrong. We were working the southbound shoulder just beyond the Lawty speed zone. From the truck, it looked like a dead raccoon. When I got closer, I thought maybe a raccoon and a possum had been hit at the same time. That happens. 2 animals fight in the road. A car comes through. Everything gets crushed together. But when I reached it, I stopped. It was not 2 animals tangled together. It was one animal, one body, one hide. The front half looked mostly like a raccoon. The back half looked like a possum. But there was no seam, no wound separating them. Gray fur became brown fur naturally. The spine began as one animal's spine and finished as the others. It looked as if both creatures had somehow been softened and pressed into a single mold while they were still moving. Reyes stood behind me. He whispered something I could not hear. Vasquez walked over. For once, he did not tell us to bag the animal. He took out his phone. He photographed it from one side, then the other, then from the front, then the back. After that, he sent the pictures to someone. He did not say who. He stood beside the highway for a long time afterward, staring south in the direction of the incinerator. That day, we worked until dark. We worked late the next day, too. Nobody explained why. That Friday, I was sitting in the truck while Vasquez looked over the week's numbers. He ran his finger down the sheet. Then, he said one word, short. That was the first time I heard him use it. I did not understand what he meant. A few weeks later, I did. Late August in North Florida is miserable. The heat does not feel like weather. It feels like something alive lying on top of you. That particular week was worse than normal. Even the animals seemed to stop moving. You would think weather would not matter much when your job involves dead animals. It does. Everything on the road depends on movement. If animals stay hidden because of the heat, fewer of them get hit. That week, we walked miles and barely collected anything. 6 bags one day, 8 the next. Almost nothing compared with normal. I watched Vasquez study his log sheet 3 separate times. Then he sent us back out after lunch. That had never happened before. We drove county roads I did not even know were included in our route. Nobody complained. Vasquez had a strange look on his face. By Thursday, we found another fused animal. This time, it was larger. A deer and a dog. One body. Again, there was no visible separation between them. The dog's collar was still around what remained of its neck. The tags were attached. Vasquez read the tags. He wrote something down. But unlike the first time, he did not take photographs. He told us to double bag it. The thing was so heavy that 3 of us had to lift it. When we reached the incinerator, it barely fit into the chute. We pushed. The body slid inside. The lid came down. Clang, I remember feeling relieved when I heard that sound. Around the same time, the building stopped moving. By then, touching the wall had become a habit for me. I would place my palm against the green metal while we unloaded. Normally, eventually, I would feel something pass behind it. That week, there was nothing. The wall was still cold, but the movement was gone. It should have made me feel better. Instead, it frightened me more. Friday afternoon, Vasquez used the radio. He stepped away from us while he spoke. I could not hear the voice on the other end, but I watched his face while he listened. When the conversation ended, he came back. We're running after dark. We had never worked after dark. Nobody asked why. We stayed out until almost 11. Hutto spent the whole day announcing his hours. 58 left. Later, 56. He was smiling when he said that last number. 56 hours. For Hutto, that was almost freedom. We were unloading the final bags at the incinerator. I was beside the truck with Reyes, lifting another bag, when I heard something strange at the chute. Normally, you heard the bag slide. Then the lid slammed. This time, there was a soft scraping sound. The bag had caught on something. Hutto cursed. He lifted the lid. Then he leaned forward. I did not see him disappear. That detail matters. My back was turned. I was holding a bag with Reyes. But I know what Hutto would have done, because any of us would have done the same thing. A bag gets stuck. You open the lid. You lean in. You push it. Then you step back. Except when I turned around, Hutto was gone. The lid was standing open. That was impossible. The lid was too heavy to remain upright by itself. There was no clang. There was no Hutto. Just an empty patch of concrete leading toward the fence. And from somewhere inside the green building, the movement had started again. We searched for Hutto for nearly an hour. I wish I could tell you we searched bravely. We did not. Vasquez walked the roadside with a flashlight. He checked both drainage ditches. He called Hutto's name again and again. Hutto. Nothing. Hutto. Nothing. It was not until the drive home that I realized what had bothered me. Vasquez had searched everywhere except the incinerator. He never pointed his flashlight toward the chute. Not once. By Saturday morning, there was paperwork on the clipboard. Hutto's name was printed across the top. Underneath it was a word. Absconded. I read it twice. According to the official record, Hutto had walked away from his community service. He had run, 56 hours away from finishing, and he had supposedly decided to disappear. That was what the paperwork said. And paperwork is what the state believes. 4 mornings later, we backed the truck toward the incinerator. From inside the cab, I noticed something sitting on the apron. The rejects looked larger than normal. Vasquez got out first. He picked up the rake. Then he stopped. For several seconds, he simply stared. Everybody stay in the truck. We stayed. Then he changed his mind. Morrow, I got out. Bring a bag. I took one of the contractor bags and walked toward him. That was when I saw the boots. Hutto's boots. They stood side by side on the concrete, perfectly straight. The toes pointed toward the fence. The laces had been carefully tucked inside. At first, I thought someone had simply left his boots there. Then I got close enough to see what remained inside them. His feet, both of them, cut off above the ankles. There was no blood on the concrete, not even a drop. Whatever had happened to Hutto had happened somewhere else. The boots had been returned afterward, placed neatly on the apron, like someone returning property to a neighbor's front porch. I stared at them. Vasquez opened the bag. That was the rule. Rejects went back in. I picked up the first boot. I still remember the weight. That is something people do not think about. A shoe with a foot inside it has a completely different weight from an empty shoe. My wrists remember it. I put both boots into the bag. Vasquez tied it. We fed it into the chute. The lid came down. Clang, neither of us said anything. After Hutto disappeared, everything returned to normal. No night routes, no extra afternoon shifts. The animal counts increased. Vasquez stopped staring at his log sheet. For 6 days, he seemed relaxed again. On the 7th day, I understood why. I did the math while standing in the shower. 6 days. That was what Hutto had bought. One man was worth 6 days. I stood under the water for a long time after realizing it. I told myself the water running down my face was why my cheeks were wet. Hutto would have hated that number. It was much smaller than 56. The next shortfall came in October. By then, I recognized the signs the same way farmers recognize approaching storms. The bag count dropped. Vasquez became quiet. We started doing extra afternoon routes. The movement inside the building stopped. That silence was always the worst part. Then Vasquez told us we would work after dark. I wish I could tell you I spent the drive thinking about Hutto. I did not. This is the part I am most ashamed of. I looked at the truck. I looked at the empty bags. And I thought about the numbers. Somewhere along the way, the system had gotten inside my head, too. I wanted us to collect enough. I wanted the box fed. That night, we were unloading the final bags when the floodlights suddenly went out. Complete darkness. Later, I learned the generator log showed the outage lasted 92 seconds. It felt longer. Something grabbed my arm. Not a hand. There were no fingers. The pressure wrapped completely around my forearm, just above the wrist. And it was warm. That is the detail I have never told anybody. Whatever touched me was warm. Not body warm. Road warm. Like asphalt after sunset, still holding the heat of the day. It pulled. My boots slid across the dirt. I felt my heels carve 2 lines toward the chute. I did not scream. I wish I could say that was because I was brave. It was not. Everything happened too fast. My body forgot how to make sound. Somewhere to my left, Reyes made a noise. I cannot describe it. I do not want to try. Then the lights came back on. I was standing several feet from where I had been before the outage. My arm was free. The chute lid stood completely open, just like the night Hutto vanished. Reyes was gone. A dark drag mark crossed the ground from his last footprints to the chute. It was wet. Greasy, there was deer hair mixed into it. On the steel edge of the chute sat Reyes's orange vest, folded into a perfect square. Folded the same way county jail folds your clothes before handing them back when you are released. Nobody said his name. We already knew. The stain around my wrist did not wash off. I scrubbed it when I got home. Soap did nothing. Bleach did nothing. The dark, greasy band slowly faded over the next week, the way a tan disappears. When it was gone, a bruise remained underneath. One perfect band around my arm. No finger marks, no thumbprint, nothing shaped like a hand. My probation officer noticed it. What happened there? Cargo strap caught me. She wrote it down. That became the truth. Because paper is what the state believes. Reyes was officially listed as absconded too. Walked off. Ran away. The Monday after he disappeared, Vasquez sat on the truck's tailgate while the rest of us prepared for the route. He did not look at me. He said only one thing about everything that had happened. You were never in danger. I stared at him. What? He kept looking down at the paperwork. It doesn't take short timers. Then he signed my hour sheet, like we had been talking about the weather. I understood what he meant. The box did not take people who were almost finished. It took the ones who still had enough time left to matter. Hutto had 56 hours. Reyes had more hours remaining than anybody. I was close enough to finishing that I was not worth taking. That was why whatever grabbed me had let go. My number was too small. I completed my community service during the first week of November. The state gave me release paperwork. I should have felt relieved. I should have driven home, thrown away the orange vest, and never gone near US 301 again. But while reading the form, I noticed something in the bottom corner. A small box. I do not think I was supposed to pay attention to it. It said RE referral. Beside it was a typed letter. Why, I asked what it meant. Nobody would explain it. I have my own guess. Tonight is Sunday. There is a shovel in the trunk of my car. Beside it is a box of heavy contractor bags. Same brand the county uses. After dark, I am going to drive south on US 301 outside Stark. I will turn on my hazard lights. I will follow the shoulder. Nobody assigned me the route. Nobody will sign an hour sheet. I will stop whenever I find something the road has left behind. Deer, possums, armadillos, raccoons, dogs, anything. I will bag everything I can find. My wrist starts aching whenever I get close to the fence around the incinerator. It has done that ever since that night. The closer I get, the stronger the ache becomes. Sometimes I think whatever is inside that green building remembers me. Sometimes I think it knows exactly how much I weigh. I keep doing the route anyway. Partly for Reyes, partly for Hutto, but mostly because I understand the numbers now. I understand what Vasquez was doing every time he stared at those log sheets. I understand what short means. I understand what happens when the road does not provide enough. And I know exactly what balances the ledger during a slow week. Somewhere in Bradford County tonight, there is probably another man standing in an intake line. Maybe he made one stupid mistake. Maybe several. Maybe he is angry. Maybe he is scared. Maybe he is staring at a form while somebody replaces his name with a number. He has no idea where they might assign him. He has no idea what waits behind that chain-link fence. He has no idea that somewhere inside a cold green building, something may already be counting. So after dark, I will drive the road again. I will pick up every dead thing I can find. Every bag matters. Every pound matters. Because that man standing in the intake line is going to need every single one of them. I was discharged from the hospital 2 hours ago. Right now, I am sitting on the edge of my bed with a brand new pair of Nike basketball shoes on the floor beside me. They were on sale. Size 11/5. The shoe on my left foot fits perfectly. The one on my right foot does not. For that one, I have to wear 3 layers of thick wool socks just to stop it from sliding off whenever I walk. I am not writing this because I want sympathy. I am also not asking anyone to contact the police for me. They already know everything I know. The case has probably been reported outside my town by now. If you have followed state news during the last 2 months, you may have seen stories about what reporters started calling the Black Pine Woods Camping Massacre. 9 teenagers went into those woods. 8 died. I was the only one who came back. Most of the reports describe what police found at the campsite, but they do not really explain what happened before that. They certainly do not explain why I survived. So I want to tell it myself. Before I explain that night, though, you need to understand something about me. If you met me normally, you probably would not notice anything unusual. I can walk. I can jog if I need to. I can climb stairs. I do not use crutches or braces. And unless I specifically tell someone about my problems, most people assume I am physically normal. But I have always known there was something wrong with the way my body worked. Ever since I was a child, sports were almost impossible for me. I do not mean that I was simply bad at them. Plenty of people are bad at basketball or football. I mean, my body seemed unable to understand what I wanted it to do. I was born with amblyopia, so when I was young, I wore these horrible bright blue glasses. My balance was also terrible. I could trip over absolutely nothing. Walking across a flat playground sometimes ended with me on the ground, staring at another scrape on my knee. I was skinny too. My parents fed me normally. I was not a picky eater. I ate meat, vegetables, bread, whatever was put in front of me. Yet I always looked like I had missed several meals. PE class in elementary school felt like a weekly public humiliation. The other kids would race across the field while I stayed near the edge, hoping the teacher would forget I existed. Running was bad. Catching was worse. Anything involving balance was hopeless. I tried practicing at home because I thought maybe I was simply lazy. I watched videos. I copied exercises. I tried standing on one foot, jumping rope, kicking balls against the garage wall. Nothing changed. At the end of almost every school year, my teachers wrote some variation of the same sentence on my report card. Quiet, but very creative. Half of that was probably true. You can decide which half. Adults have polite ways of telling parents that their child does not really fit in. They do not write. Your son is awkward and has no idea how to talk to other kids. They write quiet. They do not write. He spends recess alone because nobody wants him on their team. They write independent. Then they add something vague like creative so everyone feels better. Despite all that, I did have 2 real friends, Jonathan and Anna. We lived near each other, and we became friends soon after my family moved into the neighborhood. Jonathan was the kind of kid who would immediately push back if someone made fun of my glasses. Anna was gentler. If rain got on my lenses, she would hand me a tissue or wipe them with the edge of her sleeve. They never made me feel strange. For years, we did almost everything together. I thought that was how things would stay. Then, high school happened. Jonathan changed almost overnight. He got taller, stronger, broader. By sophomore year, he looked like someone had designed him specifically to play football. Anna changed too. Her face became sharper and more mature. She became one of those people everyone noticed when she entered a room. During the summer before 9th grade, she decided Anna no longer suited her and started calling herself Ivy. So Ivy she became. Jonathan made the football team and eventually became quarterback. Ivy became captain of the cheerleading squad. They started dating. By then, the 2 of them were basically royalty at our school. I assumed that would be the end of our friendship. I expected them to stop talking to me once they had better friends. I was already preparing myself to become one of those kids who spent lunch in the library. But they did not abandon me. Jonathan still shouted my name across crowded hallways. Ivy still waved when she saw me. They invited me places. Sometimes people at school joked that I was their pet. Others said Jonathan and Ivy only kept me around to run errands for them. Maybe there was some truth to that. I was usually the one asked to carry something, get drinks, or hold everyone's bags. They had also become rougher with me over the years. When I fell, they sometimes laughed before helping me up. Jonathan loved making jokes about my coordination. Ivy joined in occasionally. It bothered me, but I told myself it was harmless. After all, they were still my friends. And having Jonathan around protected me from people who would have treated me much worse. 10 years of friendship is difficult to throw away just because the balance changes. So when Jonathan suggested a camping trip, I agreed. There were 9 of us all together. Jonathan, Ivy, and me, along with 3 other guys from the football team and their girlfriends. The place was called Black Pine Woods. It was already cold when we arrived. The air smelled of wet bark and decaying leaves. The ground was soft from recent rain, and every step produced a quiet crunch. We found a campsite surrounded by tall trees and set up the tents before dark. Jonathan had brought several cases of beer. Ivy brought a speaker. Naturally, she controlled the music. Nobody complained. Her playlist was mostly popular songs everyone knew, so after a while, people were singing along badly around the fire. I sat on a rock, slightly away from everyone else. My job, apparently, was drinks. Whenever someone wanted another beer, they shouted my name and I handed one over. Jonathan told stories from football practice. Everyone laughed. I did not understand half the jokes, but I laughed too. And I remember feeling happy. That might be the worst part. For once, I felt included. There is a strange comfort in being part of a group. It does not matter how awkward you usually feel. For a few hours, you stop thinking about where you belong. I thought I was lucky. Then someone walked out of the trees. At first, I honestly thought it was another joke. The man was huge, not just tall, unnaturally tall. He wore a filthy black apron over dark clothes. A leather mask covered his face, with crude stitching across it, and 2 small holes cut for his eyes. In one hand, he carried a large machete. He looked so much like a villain from an old slasher movie that my first thought was Jason Voorhees. Mike was closest to him. Mike turned. That was all he had time to do. The man swung the machete into the side of his neck. Mike screamed and grabbed the wound with both hands. Blood sprayed across the nearest tent. The sound it made against the nylon was almost like rain hitting an umbrella. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then everyone started screaming at once. Jonathan rushed toward the attacker. He was strong, stronger than anyone else there. It did not matter. The masked man kicked him in the chest and sent him backward into a tree. People scattered. One of the girls fell. Another football player tried grabbing a piece of firewood. The machete came down again and again. My mind screamed at me to run. My legs refused. I watched bodies hit the ground. I watched blood spread through the dirt. I saw something that looked like an arm lying near the fire. Eventually, instinct took over. I stumbled backward. Then, exactly like the useless character in every horror movie, I caught my foot on a branch and fell. My glasses flew off. Everything immediately became blurry. I reached around desperately and then noticed movement beside me. There was a tent only a few feet away. The zipper was not completely closed. Through the opening, I saw Ivy. She was hiding inside. Her makeup had run down her cheeks. Black eyeliner was smeared around her eyes, and her face was covered with sweat and tears. She stared straight at me. Then she slowly shook her head. "Do not tell him. Please do not give me away." I had never seen Ivy look at me like that. Not once in 10 years. She looked completely helpless. So I did the only useful thing I could think of. I got up and ran away from the tent. I screamed as loudly as possible. "Hey!" I waved my arms. "Over here." I wanted him to chase me. I wanted to pull him away from her. He did not even look at me. He walked directly toward Ivy's tent. My stomach dropped. He reached down, opened the zipper, stepped inside. A scream came from the tent. It sounded strange, rough, almost too deep to be Ivy. But I was so terrified that my brain did not question it. Then came several wet impacts. The sound of a blade entering flesh. A figure collapsed. Blood sprayed across the side of the tent, glowing red in the firelight. I could not move anymore. Everyone was dead. I was the last one. I dropped to the ground. The masked man approached me slowly. He let the machete hang at his side. I could hear his breathing through the mask. Heavy, wet, almost excited. Then he stopped directly in front of me. "Hey, hero." His voice was rough, like sandpaper scraping against wood. "Stand up. Let's play a game." I shook so badly that I had trouble getting my feet under me. There was a wooden post nearby, so I grabbed it and pulled myself upright. "Stand on one foot," he said. "If you can stay up for 10 seconds, I'll let you go." Something in his voice changed at the end. He sounded happy, like a child asking someone to play. Then he started counting. 3, 2, 1. I lifted my left foot. That meant I was standing on my right. My body swayed, but I managed. He watched carefully. Then he said, "Switch." My blood went cold. Left foot only. No, that was the one thing I could not do. My left leg had always been weaker than my right. Most people did not know because it rarely affected normal walking. My parents knew. Jonathan knew. Ivy knew. That was it. I had never understood exactly what was wrong. I simply knew that whenever I tried balancing on my left foot, my ankle seemed to collapse. I wondered if the killer somehow knew. Then I told myself that was impossible. He was probably choosing randomly. It did not matter. If I failed, I would die. I lifted my right foot. Immediately, my left ankle rolled beneath me. I hit the ground before 2 seconds had passed. Again, I got up. Tried again. This time, I lasted maybe 4 seconds. My ankle folded sideways, and I crashed near the fire. Sparks landed on my clothes and burned several small holes through them. Again, I stood. Fell, stood, again. Fell again. My ankle began swelling. Pain shot up my leg every time I put weight on it. Dirt covered my hands. Fake blood covered my shirt. At the time, of course, I did not know it was fake. Tears ran down my face. Still, he made me continue. Again, I fell. Again, I tried. Again, eventually, the masked man dropped the machete. Then he started laughing. Not a quiet laugh. A huge, uncontrollable laugh. He bent over and grabbed his stomach. "Oh, my God," he gasped. "I can't do this anymore. How can somebody be this clumsy?" I froze. Then another voice came from behind me. "I told you he couldn't do it." I knew that voice. I turned. Ivy stepped out from behind the tent. She was covered in blood. But she was smiling, and completely unharmed. Then laughter exploded around the campsite. Jonathan pushed himself away from the tree. He wiped blood from his mouth. Fake blood. Mike sat up. Another girl crawled out from behind a log. The dead came back to life, one by one, laughing, cheering, high-fiving. The masked killer pulled off his mask. It was Andy, Jonathan's cousin. The machete was fake. The blade retracted into the handle. The blood was corn syrup mixed with coloring. The severed limbs were Halloween decorations. Even Ivy's scream had been fake. Andy had apparently done it for her because he could produce a better horror movie scream. They had planned everything. Every detail. The entire massacre had been a prank, and the prank had one purpose. They wanted to test something Jonathan had joked about before. He believed that even if someone threatened my life, I still would not be able to balance on my left foot for 10 seconds. They wanted proof. Now, they had it. Everyone laughed. Ivy walked over and hugged me. She thanked me for trying to save her. Then, she started laughing again because I had not realized the scream from the tent was obviously not hers. Jonathan slapped my shoulder. "Bro," he said. You know what the best part was? I stared at him. "What?" "We actually thought you might unlock some hidden survival instinct." People laughed. Jonathan continued. "You know how people suddenly become superhuman when they're about to die? We thought maybe you'd finally turn into some action hero and knock Andy out." He tried to stop himself from laughing. Failed, but nope. More laughter. "You're exactly the same." My shoulder hurt where he had slapped it. I looked around at everyone. For some reason, I smiled. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That actually is pretty funny." And then I laughed. I do not know why. Maybe because everyone else was laughing. Maybe because I was embarrassed. Maybe because accepting the joke was easier than admitting how badly they had terrified me. Jonathan began copying the way I had looked while trying to balance. He stretched his arms out and started wobbling dramatically. "Oh God, please don't kill me," he cried. "I'm a huge loser. I can't even stand straight." Everyone laughed harder. I laughed too. I sat in the dirt and laughed at myself, at my body, at how stupid I must have looked. Jonathan kept wobbling closer. Then his movements suddenly stopped. His arms dropped. His eyes widened. The laughter coming from his mouth changed into a wet choking sound. For a moment, I thought he was still acting. I almost told him that the joke was over. Then I saw the blade. A real machete had come through his chest. Blood ran along the metal. It dripped from the tip. One drop landed on my shoe. Jonathan fell forward. He hit the ground directly in front of me. Behind him stood a man I had never seen before. He was nothing like Andy's costume. No mask, no bloody apron. He wore clean gray overalls and an old-fashioned newsboy cap. Thick metal-framed glasses sat on his nose. He looked ordinary, painfully ordinary. If I had seen him walking through a supermarket, I would not have looked twice. He reminded me of a quiet science teacher. He looked down at Jonathan, then at the rest of us. "Don't kids these days know anything about manners?" His voice was calm, almost disappointed. He looked around the campsite and counted. 10. He paused. Still 9 left. Then he picked up a shotgun. All right. This time, Ivy screamed for real. I knew immediately. There was no performance in that sound. Everyone ran. The man did not chase them. He did not need to. He raised the shotgun. The first blast shook the woods. Someone fell. Another blast. Then another. People screamed. Trees echoed. Someone begged. Another shot answered them. It happened so quickly that my mind could not process it. I stayed beside Jonathan. Maybe that saved me. Maybe the killers simply did not consider me a threat. Within minutes, the campsite became quiet again. This time, nobody stood back up. The campfire cracked softly. Blood soaked into the earth. I could hear liquid bubbling somewhere nearby. The man walked toward me. He crouched. His clothes were surprisingly clean. There were only a few tiny drops of blood on his glasses. Then, in a gentle voice, he said something that made my entire body go cold. "Stand on one foot for me." I stared at him. He smiled slightly, not cruelly, encouragingly, like a teacher asking a student to solve a simple problem. Something inside me broke. The terror was too much. Or maybe the faked massacre had already drained every bit of panic out of me. Either way, I suddenly felt calm. I can't, I said. He tilted his head. Stand up. I obeyed. Left foot only. My ankle was already injured from the prank. Still, I tried. I lifted my right foot. My left ankle collapsed. I fell directly in front of him. I can't do it, I whispered. I really can't. I lowered my face into the dirt. I remember the smell. Wet earth, smoke, blood. I waited for the gunshot. I've never been good at sports, I said. My coordination is awful. I'm a loser. I can't do it. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then he sighed. I lifted my head. He was sitting on Jonathan's body. Jonathan was still alive. Barely, blood bubbled from the corner of his mouth every time he tried to breathe. The man reached down and gently patted my shoulder. Good boy. Then he helped me sit upright. Take off your shoes and socks. The request was strange, but by then I would have done anything. I removed them. He took my left ankle in one hand. His skin was cold. His palm was rough and covered in thick calluses. He twisted my ankle. I screamed. He rotated it the other direction. Pain shot up my leg. Stand, I tried. I fell. This time he caught me. He lowered me carefully back onto the ground. Then he touched the area beneath my ankle. I know what's wrong. He pointed. Your talus is malformed. Congenital, your medial ankle ligament is extremely loose. I stared at him. He spoke with absolute confidence. This isn't poor coordination. His eyes met mine. Your anatomy is limiting you. He examined my foot again. Then he looked almost sympathetic. It's not your fault. He paused. But don't worry. He smiled. I'll fix it. That is the last thing I remember from the woods. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. People constantly moved around my bed. Doctors, nurses, police, detectives. Someone was always asking a question. Someone else was always telling me to rest. Eventually, I learned what the police had found. 2 officers reportedly vomited after entering the campsite. All 8 of my friends were dead. Several bodies were missing limbs. Those missing parts were not found anywhere nearby. Police believed the killer had taken them. I was the only survivor. A nurse eventually warned me that I needed to prepare myself before she pulled back the blanket covering my legs. It's a miracle, one of the doctors said. I did not understand. Then he explained. When police found me, my lower left leg had been completely severed. That made sense. I could barely feel anything below my knee. I expected to look down and see nothing. Instead, I saw a foot. There was a thick ring of dark purple stitches around my lower leg, about 2 inches above the ankle. The skin below the stitches was different from mine. Darker, wheat-colored. The foot itself was much larger than my right one, and there was a hard callus along the big toe. I recognized that callus. I had seen it dozens of times in locker rooms and at sleepovers. It came from years of wearing football cleats. It was Jonathan's foot. The man had cut off Jonathan's left foot. Then he had attached it to me. Doctors told me they had originally expected to perform another amputation higher up my leg. There was no logical reason the foot should have survived. The surgery had apparently been performed outdoors. No proper sterile equipment. No hospital. No controlled conditions. And the foot had come from another human being. A transplant like that should have caused devastating infection, rejection, tissue death, or all 3. Instead, it healed. Not perfectly at first, but impossibly well. My blood vessels connected. The nerves gradually began responding. The tissue remained healthy. My immune system behaved as if Jonathan's foot had always belonged to me. One doctor kept staring at the scar. He looked more fascinated than frightened. I've never seen anything like this, he told me. He later asked whether I would participate in a medical research project. I said no. I spent 2 months in the hospital. The police questioned me constantly. What did the killer look like? Ordinary. What happened? There was a prank, and then there was a massacre. Why did he let you live? I don't know. Did he say anything else? No. I told him everything. Every detail. The glasses, the overalls, the cap, the shotgun, the machete, the way he examined my ankle. His exact words. As far as I know, they still have not found him. After surgery, therapy, police interviews, psychological counseling, and rehabilitation, I was finally discharged today. My psychologist told me I should talk about what happened instead of keeping it inside. So on the way home, I stopped at a store. I bought 2 bottles of milk. Then, I bought shoes. Finding the right size was difficult. My own right foot is still the same size it has always been. Jonathan's left foot is almost 2 sizes larger. Technically, I need 2 different pairs. I did not feel like buying both today, so I chose the larger size. That explains the wool socks. And now I am here, sitting on my bed, writing this. Physically, I feel surprisingly good. Better than before, actually. Jonathan's foot is strong, really strong. The muscles respond instantly when I move. The ankle feels stable. There is a strange amount of power in it. Sometimes, when I walk, I can feel the difference between my 2 legs so clearly that it feels like half of me belongs to another person. But there is no pain. I can move all 5 toes. I can feel the floor beneath them. I can feel heat and cold. I can even feel blood pulsing through the foot when I lie, still at night. And there is one other thing, something I discovered during rehabilitation. I can stand on 1 foot now, my left foot, his foot. At first, I managed 10 seconds, then 30, then a minute. Yesterday, I tried closing my eyes. I stayed upright for more than a minute without moving. No shaking, no falling. Nothing the man in the woods was right. He fixed me. I keep thinking about Jonathan, about that night, about how hard everyone laughed when I kept falling, about him standing in front of the fire, waving his arms, pretending to be me. I wonder what he would say if he could see me now. Maybe he would laugh. Maybe he would be impressed. Maybe he would finally admit that I can do something he thought I never could. I do not know. It is getting late now. My new shoes are still beside the bed. The left one fits beautifully. The right one looks ridiculous with all those socks stuffed inside it. But I suppose I will get used to that. Good night, Anna, or Ivy, if that is what you would still want me to call you. Good night, Jonathan. I hope wherever you are both at peace. And Jonathan, thank you for the foot. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survived things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.